by Judge Jimmy Edwards. In there, the judge reviews a decision made by prosecutors, which are accountable to the court, not part of the circuit attorney's office. And then the judge decides whether to hold that juvenile accountable. And I would encourage you, if juvenile crime is a fundamental issue for your neighborhood, you need to call and talk to Judge Jimmy Edwards, because he is a lifelong resident of this city. He graduated, I'm going to get it wrong, at Bashan, because I don't want to say Soldan. It's Bashan. He is adamant about helping clean up this city, and he wants to hear from the community. And he has partnered with many neighborhoods around this city to have neighborhood accountabilities for juvenile crime. So if the person's under 17, all those cases right now go in front of Judge Jimmy Edwards. All right? Now, if the person is an adult, and in Missouri that's 17, with some exceptions if they're certified, that's very rare, it goes one of three places. Either it goes to the state, and that means my office, the Circuit Attorney Jennifer Joyce, okay? If it's a state level crime. If it's a city ordinance violation, some of your problem properties issues, chronic offenders, problem landlords, public nuisance, those are all in city court, okay? And that head of that office is the city councilor who's appointed by the mayor. She takes her cases to the city court judges, okay? And they're all appointed by the mayor. And there's a system in place with the city councilor's office for you to work with them to learn what's important to your neighborhood. So cases that are important to your neighborhood are problem properties, you go to the city courts and you focus your efforts there. And then the third is federal court. That's the what we call in our office the feds. And they often handle bigger cases, you know, your truckloads of pot, your very large quantities of dope connected to international drug cartels. So the vast majority of crime in the city comes to state court, okay? That would be misdemeanors and felonies, and they're all under the responsibility of the circuit attorney, who takes her cases in front of a circuit court judge. And so the decisions in a circuit court case are the ones that most of us think about. Those that you hear, and I often hear from community groups, their frustration that people are back on the street. And so let's talk about kind of the process that involves a circuit court case, all right? And if you have questions as we go along, just raise your hand, because I'm trying to be sort of, give you a big picture. Yes, ma'am?
Sorry,
No, I wanted you to.
Okay, if there's a problem property or someone who's been arrested in our neighborhood and we want to go to that hearing, it's specifically the police caught 2 different groups of guys who are breaking in our neighborhood. How do we find out about the hearing dates? I hope I'm not jumping ahead or anything.
Okay, that's a legitimate question. Let's talk about that. You need to find out from the officer where they took the case. Did the case go to city court? Because most problem properties go to city court. Or did they bring individuals to the circuit attorney's office for burglary or robbery or trespass? Those cases come to circuit court. So step 1, that relationship with your officer, where did they take the case? Okay. Step 2, if it comes to city councilors, you need to call the city councilor's problem property division and ask who the prosecutor is handling that case. And then they can give you where the case is, what day it is, what's going on, and what the likely outcome is at the city court level. I see it, Ian. Yes, officer.
No, I was just going to say, if you want to write this down, www.courts.mo.gov / or to the right, CaseNet.
Oh, CaseNet. Just go to Missouri CaseNet. Or you can Google CaseNet Missouri.
CaseNet.
Right.
Or you can search CaseNet, or either way. But bottom line is, so your question is how are they able to follow it? Once you go to that website and you type in the defendant's name, first or last name, preferably the last name, it'll pull out the information. It'll tell you what judge, prosecuting attorney, when their next trial hearing date is, et cetera, et cetera. All that information is right there, and you can follow it from beginning to end. And that's exactly what Fairway Park does. They literally follow it along the steps along the way. She'll elaborate on that, I'm sure. But the bottom line is go to CaseNet. if you want to
We
track.
need
But
the-
what you-
We need the name, though.
Right.
What
Yeah.
name of what?
The name of the people who were arrested in the neighborhood.
Correct.
Can we
Yes.
get that from you?
And then you're gonna
Probably
wanna
should,
call the.
you're probably gonna know that, and one thing about that, and I don't want to interrupt you because you're in a flow here, but the bottom line is, the name will be released to you if the warrants were applied on and they were issued. If they're not, then those won't be released to you. If they're a juvenile, they won't be released to you. Those two ways, you're not gonna get that particular information. That's the law, they're protected. Okay, am I right in saying that? You're not gonna get that
Juvenile
info.
court, yes. Your legal department, you gave the right answer. So, but CaseNet will tell you a general date. What it won't tell you is what is gonna really happen. And one of the ways I've seen community groups get really burned out is they think there's a court date and then they show up because they see something called pretrial conference. And then they realize there's something happening in the back, we have nothing, it's just a scheduling date. And so what you really want to do is get to know the prosecutors in either the city councilor's office or in my office, because what I would hate to see happen is community groups get themselves burned out because they keep showing up and nothing happens. And there is some of that. But by learning and educating yourselves and developing those relationships with the prosecutors, they can say, look, it's just going to be a status conference. He's just going to give it a new date. Let's roll it over. And that also gives you the opportunity to educate that prosecutor on what's important to you. Because when we have community interest and we know and understand the significance of a particular case to a particular area, that makes it look different than the 50,000 other cases just like it. And that's what you want. You want people to know and understand the significance of a particular incident to your neighborhood, because it's personal to you. Okay? So CaseNet is great, and you can actually sign up, and we can go over it, I have this a little bit later, but you can actually sign up through a program called VineLink, so you get automated notice. We'll go over that in a minute. But that's knowing who the problem offenders are and working with the prosecutors so you know what's the best bang for your buck. Okay? Well, let's talk a little bit about circuit court and kind of steps along the way, because there's a lot of jargon in the justice system. And so when you look at the website, you can also look at the circuit attorney's website for upcoming court dates. You can also see what we're going to ask for on a case. And then in the end, you can see what the judge gave. And so let's go through some of those steps so you can kind of begin to think about what's important to us. All right? When the police arrest somebody in the city of St. Louis, they must bring it, if it's a state crime, they must bring it to the circuit attorney's office and get authority to hold that person within 24 hours of the arrest. That's state law. If they don't do that, the person walks out the door. That very seldom happens. The police have a very automated system where every arrest at the state level is brought to the circuit attorney's office within 24 hours. And at that point, an assistant circuit attorney reviews it to see if what the police have evidence of matches the legal definition. And this is an area where the neighborhoods and the community can have a huge impact. The number one reason that cases are not pursued once an arrest is made, number one across the board, is because the necessary victims or witnesses did not cooperate and did not appear in the warrant office. And what some communities have done is work together with the police to back up those victims, offered an elderly person a ride to the warrant office. Or if they know the person's scared, just giving them a note saying, we're here behind you, you're not going to go through this alone. Lafayette Square has really worked hard with a lot of the landlords from its neighborhood to make sure that even though they live in Chesterfield, that landlord is there in the warrant office when we need them there. Because by law, we have to prove certain elements. And if the person who owns the property or is a victim does not appear, we can't do that. That's one way communities can work. When they know who the victims are, they act as a backup to that victim to get them a ride to the courthouse, to let them know they're not alone. Okay? That is a powerful way of making sure that people are held accountable. Okay? In the warrant office, though, once the victim shows up or a case proceeds, it next goes through a screening process. Every judge double checks what the prosecutor does in felony cases. And so if the case is a felony, and I heard somebody talking about a burglary, that's a felony. In every case where there's a felony, the judge will go and say, is there enough evidence based on what the prosecutors have given me to make this person go forward to trial? And that either happens at grand jury or preliminary hearing. Okay? If there is not enough evidence, and if the victim doesn't show up at preliminary hearing, and if the victim doesn't show up at grand jury, that case is dismissed and the person walks out the door. Again, number one reason where people are not held accountable in the city is because we don't have the necessary victims and witnesses. Okay? So that's another area where community groups have worked with people, especially if they realize their neighbor's afraid, or oftentimes the neighbor will say, I got my car back, insurance has covered it, I don't want the hassle, so they walk away from it. Easy for them, but what happens is a lot of these chronic offenders, that's not the only time they've done it. So by that one person saying, I'm done, that's the only one we've caught them on. That person's just right back out the door. So working with your fellow residents to make sure, hey, do you need a ride to court? When's their court date? Do you have somebody to sit with you? I can go sit with you. Or have you talked to the Victim Services Office at the Circuit Attorney's Office? I know they'll sit with you. That community support of that absolutely important person helps us hold that defendant accountable. So after that preliminary hearing stage, then the case goes to an arraignment. And this is where some community groups have actually gone to court. At arraignment, the defendant walks in and either pleads guilty or not guilty. In the end, they all plead not guilty right there. Everybody's not guilty there because that's what their lawyer tells them to do. Okay? No question. But what also happens there is that's one of the first times the defendant actually has a lawyer. And one of the first times they walk in and say, look, little Johnny's only 19, Judge. I know he's got some probation issues, but he's really working on cleaning it up, and he's going back to school, and his mom's in the back of the room probably for the first time in his entire life. We let him out on bond. And the judge, faced with that, he turns to the circuit attorney, well, what kind of record does little Johnny have? And we'll flip, well, he's 19, he has a couple of arrests, he's on paper. The judge says, okay, I've got a jail overcrowding. Little Johnny walks out and gets bond. Where community groups have found power is, well, they know little Johnny has broken into 15 houses. They also know that the minute Johnny gets arrested, their crime drops down. So they show up, either give us a letter, and they often will sign it from the whole group, or one person comes down and says, Judge, I know what they're telling you about little Johnny, but I'm telling you, as a resident in this neighborhood, I've paid attention to crime in my neighborhood, and I've listened to my neighbors. I'm asking you to remember that he has an impact on crime in my neighborhood. Judge Stelzer and Judge Paula Bryant are the two judges who do that for us right now. That's their assignment. They are incredibly receptive to hearing from people from the community because they both live here, both lifelong residents here, and they know and understand what it must have taken to get somebody to express that sort of interest. I have yet to have them say, no, I won't hear from that person. And I have yet to hear them say, I'm going to ignore what that community person's asking me to do. So that's a place where you can have impact on making sure that person doesn't just get right back out. Okay? And then from there, it's set for trial. Okay? And either the person pleads guilty or is found guilty. In the city of St. Louis, 98% of the people plead guilty. Okay? So why would you as a community group want to come in and say, hey, do something with this guy if he's just going to plead guilty? Well, because people often will come in and just say, Judge, I'm going to throw myself on the mercy of the court. There's really no plea deal between the prosecutor and the state. Because our office usually asks for jail time on repeat offenders, okay? And the defense attorney usually asks for probation on repeat offenders. That's both of our jobs. And the judge is left in a position of saying, okay, how do I decide what to do? What makes this person worthy of one versus the other? Because not everybody can go to prison. I haven't paid enough taxes for that to happen. I suspect nobody in here has paid enough taxes so that everybody goes to prison. So how do we help the judges make an informed choice? Because that's what it's about, is giving them information about what's happening here. You either send letters or you come in and talk about what it's like to live on a block where there are chronic brain kids. You send the judge a letter.